Grab your flashlight and prepare to experience unspeakable eldritch horrors, people, because we're going deep into Call of Cthulhu. From the twisted and problematic mind of H.P. Lovecraft comes the spooky mystery TTRPG game where maniacal cults and chilling terrors are lurking behind the scenes. We're going to talk about this classic tabletop game and extract 8 rules from it you can drop into your D&D game to spice things up, and we'll attempt to refrain from going insane while doing it. Let's pound the pavement and brace ourselves against the unknowable. First up, Cthulhu uses a roll under system. Dice rolls are mostly 1d100 where you'll need to roll lower than your skill number, so the higher your skill, the easier it is to succeed. Very different from a d20 system where you roll the die, add a number, then compare it to a target number. More simple, I think. The roll under system has variants, like in some instances where PCs, called investigators in this game, need to roll less than half of your skill for a hard success, or under 1/5 for an extreme success. Now, I'm not suggesting you rip out 5e's d20 system, but I do like the idea of occasionally dropping in this roll under mechanic in certain circumstances. And I like it in situations where you might roll against yourself. Hold on, let me explain. When you make an attack roll, you're rolling against an enemy's armor class, but when you're making a history check, you're not rolling compared to some external force or challenge. It's a test of your own mind against your own mind. Here's a situation I could see this being useful. A PC enters a town and sees some gamblers playing an unfamiliar card game. The player asks the GM, "Do I understand how this card game works? Would I get a sense of the rules by watching them play?" And the GM would normally say, roll a d20, add your intelligence mod, and we'll compare it to a DC of say 10 or 12 or 14. It's all a bit arbitrary. Wouldn't it be easier and faster to just say, roll a d20 against your intelligence score? If it's under, then yes, you intuitively know how this game works. Second, let's talk about pushing a roll. There's an age-old debate in 5e circles about being able to make a skill roll more than once when in a non-combat situation. Can the barbarian try multiple times to break down the door? Can the rogue try as many times as she wants to pick the lock? If you keep trying something until you succeed, then what's the point of rolling at all? I played in one group where the DM would only let us roll once, because he would say the roll is not the result of a single attempt, the roll is the result of the sum total of actions related to that task. I tend to let players roll a second time at disadvantage if they fail the first roll, but in Call of Cthulhu there's a mechanic known as pushing a roll. If you fail the first time, the second attempt comes with higher stakes attached. This is like how Blades in the Dark has position of controlled, risky, and desperate, which increases with each successive attempt. So now you tell the rogue, yes, you can try again to pick the lock, but you do hear something large approaching in the hallway behind you. Are you sure you want to spend more time on this task, or do you want to instead flee or find somewhere to hide? Now let's talk about sanity. A major component of Call of Cthulhu is the fragility of the human mind and the ability to tolerate all this awful and unknowable crap going on. When faced with something horrific, you roll 1d100 against your sanity score. Failed rolls result in a reduced number of sanity points. Regaining lost sanity is not an easy process. You could port over something like this to 5e directly for horror games, but I think it's still useful in vanilla high fantasy D&D. Consider that in a typical day, your average adventurer has experiences that most people would find impossible to cope with. Close contact with monsters, intense violence, repeated life or death situations. Of course, the idea is that adventurers are not most people and are able to endure the daily traumas of adventuring. But if you want a grittier, more realistic game, consider introducing this mechanic as stress or morale. I would give each character a number of stress points equal to their wisdom score, or possibly wisdom score plus their character level. Make a list of terrible things someone might witness, and here's a good place to get player input. Ask them, what events would your PC find traumatic, and assign a point cost to each thing on the list. Then, when faced with something awful, like being temporarily charmed by a vampire, going unconscious in battle, or seeing another PC in the party die, then they lose stress points. And when that point total drops below a certain number, there are penalties such as gaining no benefit from a short rest, or a long rest only functioning like a short rest. That makes sense to me because if I saw my friend the druid dissolved inside the acidic body of a gelatinous cube in the afternoon, I might have trouble sleeping that night. and regaining lost stress points could be done through downtime between sessions. Next up is group luck rolls. Lots of games have this random luck system, and I've talked before about how I use a d6 roll to determine simple yes or no chance rolls. But what I like about Cthulhu's luck system is this notion of the group luck roll. Here, only the investigator who has the lowest score rolls. This could work for 5e because group ability checks is one of those systems where I've seen a wide variance in how it's handled at different tables. I've seen some GMs take the average of all the rolls. I've seen some GMs toss out the highest and lowest and use the average of the middle scores. I've seen some GMs declare that if half succeed, then all succeed, with exceptions for nat 20s and nat 1s. But I dig this idea of the lowest score PC being the one who rolls. Because if all 6 of your party members are trying to be stealthy, it doesn't matter how super silent the rogue is. All it takes is one clanky paladin in full plate to make noise to give away the whole group. This feels more realistic to me, plus it's way more tense. Fifth on our list is major wounds. In Call of Cthulhu, if you lose half of your hit points in a single blow, then you receive a major wound. The logic behind this is that a dozen punches may do the same amount of actual damage as a single bullet wound, but a bullet wound is harder to recover from. You have to pass a con save or go unconscious. I think that's a bit extreme for 5e, but losing half or more of your HP in a single attack sounds like it should come with some consequences. It seems fair. I would think a penalty like falling prone is okay, or maybe a penalty like the slow spell where you lose either your movement or bonus action for the next turn. But I would only do this to a PC probably once in a combat to avoid creating a death spiral, because the lower your HP, the easier it is to lose half of it in one blow, so this would keep happening over and over again, making it harder to recover from. Next is chases. I have expressed my dissatisfaction with how 5e does chases before on more than one occasion. It's just not a good system for action montages. But in Call of Cthulhu, there's a whole chapter dedicated to running them, which is awesome. I'm not going to tell you every little detail about how this functions because I believe the Keeper rulebook is worth a purchase just for this one chapter. Link in the description down below. But I want to highlight a couple of the coolest mechanics here. First up is this concept of locations. The book says that you think of your chases as an abstract series of sequential locations, and so you put a line of dots on a sheet of paper. Left dot is the starting point, farthest right dot is the final location. This is perfect for theater of the mind, so you can easily keep track. You don't have to know which exact future location is which dot in case the action is not going along a linear route. Like I said, it's abstract. That upcoming dot could be an alley, or the inside of a restaurant, or a section of highway, or whatever is logical for the scene. The GM just writes down which character is at which dot to track the distance between the two, and the remaining distance the escapee needs to cover to get away and end the chase. It's free-flowing and adaptable. Next are complications in the form of hazards and barriers, which you also write on the sheet with the dots. These are things at locations that could be used to slow down the PCs and/or the NPCs. Likely some sort of ability check or skill challenge is used to bypass the hazard or barrier. But what I like about all of this is the simplicity of it, so it can be run quickly to keep the sense of action at the table high. If you've ever found the 5e chase system lacking, then take a look at how Cthulhu does it. Next, let's chat about the development phase. This is like a mix of leveling and downtime. In Cthulhu, players mark when their investigators successfully use a skill. Then, in between scenarios or adventures, they can roll against that skill and then get a permanent bonus to that skill if they succeed. This reminds me of Skyrim, or maybe it was Elder Scrolls Oblivion, where a player could improve a skill just by using it. Makes sense, right? If you craft a lot, you should get better at crafting in general. But I don't think in 5e you'd want to let your barbarians get a strength score increase every time they successfully knock down a door. But maybe it could work like this. Every time an ability check succeeds, the player puts a little dot near that skill on the character sheet. Once they accumulate 3 or 5 successes, then the next roll comes at advantage and the count resets. Maybe it's every 5 for skills they're proficient in and 3 for skills they're not proficient in. Just be aware this is a significant increase in character sheet bookkeeping, so it's definitely not for every group. Finally, the idea roll. Since Call of Cthulhu is a mystery game, it's largely about uncovering clues. If players miss or forget a clue and now find themselves stuck in a scenario, they can call for an idea roll. If they succeed, the keeper reminds them of a clue and helps them connect the evidence. For example, Say the players didn't explore one section of a dungeon that had an important key they needed to access the next level. So the party succeeds the roll and the GM tells the players, now that you think about it, there was a door back there you forgot to open. And if they fail the roll, the GM still imparts that same reminder and connective tissue, but now they are, quote, in the thick of it, and get added danger as a result. Either way, no more impasse. You could offer this in D&D like a devil's bargain when players get lost. I will give you a clue, but it raises the stakes. Using our previous example, the GM tells the players about the door they missed, but now there will be an ogre waiting behind it when they backtrack and open that door. So there we have 8 interesting rules to steal from this excellent and well-polished TTRPG, Call of Cthulhu. I highly recommend you check it out on your own because it's full of great bits, and it's by and large a very different game from 5e. A whole new experience based much more on investigating than fighting bad guys. And so here is where I leave you. Until next time, this is GM Jim. Now go out there and face that eldritch horror head on. What's the worst that could happen?